folks, welcome back to the channel. It's Chris with One.Daily, and today it's going to be another long video, and there's not going to be a lot of knives in it. This one is sort of an ode to my very favorite knife, and so it's going to be a little bit more of an in-depth video, I guess, on the maker of the knife and some of the ways that I'm kind of investigated to try and date the knife a little bit. And this is kind of the last knife of my kind of cool vintage collection, so I'm spending a little bit more time on it. I'm also going to share a little bit about what I'm carrying in my pocket, which is this Eureka Jack. You'll see it in the video. Stick around, check out the video. If anyone knows anything further about this knife, what I could be sharing, if it's not read out of the book, it's an opinion, and I'm just taking a bit of a guess on it. So if there's any authorities out there on specifically Miller Brothers knives, and maybe even this one, maybe even you have some information on this particular knife or advertising knives in general, take a look at the video. Let me know. I would love to hear from you in the comments, and okay, have a great day. All right. I'm going to start quickly with just what I'm carrying today. This week, actually, what I'm doing is I'm carrying kind of like a new knife every week, and I'll talk about it a little bit. This isn't what we're here for today, but I want to share with you what I'm carrying, and this is a GEC Eureka Jack, and I'm really enjoying the pattern. I don't have my ruler here. I'm pretty sure that it is 3 7/8 or 3 5/8 in that neighborhood. So it's a good size. And you know me, I generally carry a single blade knife is one of my favorite. But if I have a 2-blade knife, I would love if the secondary blade is a coping, because you can see here I've started to use this guy a little bit. And I got this knife for $140 because I bought it used. It's a pattern that I wanted to try out, but I wasn't sure if I would like it, so I didn't want to spend for a brand new one. But this one was like, they're so lightly used that it's I don't know, it's kind of just as good as a new one, unless you're just only putting a knife up, which I'm gonna try and use this knife. So I like to have a longer full size, something with a belly of some sort on it for food, and then that coping blade is the perfect blade for your opening boxes and slashing stuff. I just really like that setup, and this is one of the only knives I could find that had like a specific secondary coping blade with the larger blade as well. Plus it's really pretty, and I just think that this is a super interesting shape to the knife. Like, this silhouette is really cool. It's got elements of a dog leg in it, elements of a serpentine in it, and it's just kind of ornate and interesting. And it also does feel really good in the hand. And just because we're doing it, quickly in the Levin's guide, it talks about Eureka Jacks, which is what this is. And I'll just briefly go over this. The most elegant serpentine jack of all is a shape that Western states called the Eureka. I much prefer this name to the more descriptive but hopelessly awkward swell center serpentine balloon, right? Yeah, it's a lot. The Eureka was primarily a deluxe cattle knife die, but it was also used for jackknives. It is shaped like a dog leg, except that it has bulbous balloon ends and a pointed projection in the middle of the back. It looks better than it sounds, and it is a rare and desirable pattern. Schrade called this shape the Norfolk pattern, and it may indeed have been first made by Joseph Rogers and Sons, whose plant at number 6 Norfolk Street in Sheffield was called the Norfolk Works. Okay, so that's where they get Norfolk. However, Schrade seems to have copied the shape from Remington, who in turn had copied it from Boker, who had probably copied it from New York Knife Company. Maybe New York Knife had copied it from Rogers. Okay, so there you go, a little bit about this shape, the Eureka Jack, but that is not what we're here for today, but I just wanted to share with you what's in my pocket. And you know, that's what's cool about GEC is they remake kind of odd little old patterns. Now, Tony Bose with Case Collaboration did one of these. But I mean, that knife's like, you know, I think they go for like $400 and $500 or something like that. So for $150, I'm pretty happy with this knife, and I will let you guys know how I like it later. Got it in a slip from a gentleman named Quentin I found on Facebook, and it fits 2-blade knives. I didn't have a lot of 2-blade knife slips, so here it is. But what we're here to talk about today is basically the pinnacle of my collection, or what I considered my prized knife, if you will. And pay no attention to the box. This was I bought this box because I got it for like $10, and I was gonna refinish it. But the knife we're talking about is this Miller Brothers. And see, I was gonna make this box like a display for it, take the king cutter out and mount this card up here that goes with the knife. So let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of the plastic here. All right, so looks like kind of your average vintage jackknife, and you know, for most part it is, but this one's a little bit special, both in the shape that it's in. It's in very good shape, but it's also an advertising knife, and we're going to get into that. But first I wanted, just because this is like the grand finale of my vintage stuff, so I always intended on doing something special for this knife, but not now. It's just that I am sort of forced to part with it. As you guys have heard the ongoing saga in my in most of my videos. But here, let's dive in a little bit about Miller Brothers, because it's a Miller Brothers knife, and it's a very significant maker, along with being you know, a great knife and an advertising piece and all that. But let's just get into the Miller Brothers, because this is what I want to do. In 1863, the Miller brothers, George and William, commenced operation in Yalesville and Wallingford. They moved to Meriden in 1872. Miller Brothers was an important firm that did much private brand contracting. Its knives are of exceptional quality. Many have the handle scales secured by tiny brass screws, a Miller Brother trademark. Any older American knife with such screws is a contract knife made by Miller Brothers. This doesn't have the screws, but I have one with screws. Look at this big whopper of a whaler knife, like a Navy rope knife. This has the screws, as you can see, holding it on in the handle, which they are known for. And it also has this brass bail that like spins freely, as inside the well it is peened from the inside, and this blade is very, very full. But this is a cleanup project for a different video, not what we're talking about today. But I did want to show that I have one that has the screw handle like they're speaking of here. All right, so on we go. In 1878, Miller Brothers was reorganized under William Rockwell, who soon took the lead in the American cutlery industry's fight for tariff protection. Miller Brothers is very like an esteemed brand, much because of this tariff fight that they went through in 1888, and I'm going to get into that. So this will be a wordy video, and yeah. The greedy effort bore fruit in the Tariff Acts of 1890, 1897, and 1901. In consequence, Sheffield and Soligen, finding the U.S. market nearly closed to their knives, instead began exporting unemployed cutlers to work in the now flourishing American cutlery industry. American consumers paid dearly for these tariffs. In inflated prices and lost markets, but Rockwell and a few other factory owners profited handsomely from them. Miller Brothers even managed to win U.S. Navy contracts for sailor knives away from Sheffield suppliers who had who had had a lock on the business since our Navy had first set sail. Miller Brothers got out of the knife business in favor of steel pens in 1926. The firm went out of business in 1943. Okay, so we can do away with this Levin's Guide now. Basically, these tariff acts are, I think, going to help me at least take an educated guess on the date of this knife, because I believe it to be fairly early. They went out of business in 1926, but I think that this knife is a little bit older than that. And it's because of this advertising piece that goes with it that I'm going to discuss in a minute. But first, I want to, because I'm very interested in the Tariff Acts and the part of William Rockwell's influence in the Tariff Act and what came out of that, and because it's credited with saving the cutlery industry in the United States altogether. So what's very, very cool is that I have this book, the Great Eastern Cutlery book. This book is amazing when it comes to understanding a little bit deeper some of the history of these companies, the parts they played, and then also what were these guys running these companies like, because they were fairly devoid of ethics and any other estimable quality. They did put out fantastic cutlery, but it was not, this was, if you've ever seen the movie Gangs of New York, right? And you think about the characters in and around Tammany Hall and the corruption thereof, this was essentially very near and around that time period. And this is a cartoon that depicts kind of what was happening around that time. And the cutlery industry was trying to undercut the import of inexpensive German knives, as well as the very established Sheffield makers of the time, because United States could not produce as good a quality and have a profit margin. They were suffering a great deal. And that's why Miller Brothers was reorganized in, 1878, right? And here's a little cartoon, right? All these guys are bowing down to the Tariff Act guy here, or the Taft administration, maybe it was. I'm not sure who this character is. And you can see here that there's like a, kind of a George Washington type figure kicking out I don't know, maybe an Englishman or something like that in the cartoon. But let's get to where Miller Brothers kind of comes into this and is credited with really helping in this tariff fight. This stuff changed the cutlery market, guys. If you guys are in industry, the cutlery industry in the United States, if you're at all interested in that, this is where everything changed from Sheffield imports and cheaper German imports. Okay, so right here this is about William F. Rockwell, the president of Miller Brothers, and also the president of the American Cutlery Association. And there's a longer name for it, but it was the group that was tasked with trying to manipulate tariffs to benefit American cutlery manufacturers. Okay. Mr. John Goins, the author of the Goins Encyclopedia of Cutlery Markings, states in his book about William F. Rockwell, the owner of Miller Brothers USA and president of the American Cutlery Association, that the ultimate success not only of his own company but of the industry itself was very largely due to the ability of William F. Rockwell of the Miller Brothers Cutlery Company. It was his untiring efforts, along with others, that persuaded the framers of tariff legislation the necessity of protecting of the industry. It was this protection that made it possible for American manufacturers to produce pocket knives that was the equal of, if not superior to, any other in the world. As the article states, Mr. Rockwell was a significant player in this tariff game. Others commented that the association goals, which were to control production and costs, actually cheated on themselves, and many did not follow the design of the group and continued their former ways of doing business. Even with the reintroduction of the association near the end of the 1800s, greed and similar business tactics prevailed, and the organization failed once again. So there was a company, and actually KC had one of these knives on his channel recently, and that is the Alfred Field and Company knife that he had on there. They were an importer at the time of, knives from Sheffield and German, and they were accused by this group, the American Cutlery Association, of undervaluing their cutlery. Okay, so what they were saying was that they were intentionally undervaluing their cutlery so that they could charge less prices here in the United States that would undercut local manufacturers who were unable to produce cutlery at the same prices. So just a quick little excerpt into this Alfred Field and something he had to say. While dissecting this news story, the planting of a so-called detective reference introduced a rather fascinating twist. Further research revealed that the attempt to infiltrate and expose those wrongdoings by the importers would only lead to further problems for the industry in America as corruption continued abroad. The subcommittee hearings on the tariff, recorded in December of 1888, reveals just how this detective situation was carried out, at least as it was interpreted by A.H. Saxon and George W. Korn of the Alfred Field and Company. We know the A. Field and Company was a major importer of cutlery products at this time. Mr. Korn was actually well known for his straight razors that he sold from his Little Valley, New York business. Obviously, they were not in favor of undervaluation theory and wanted to discredit the American Cutlery Association as well. Take into consideration Mr. Korn's location and the desired effect that the tariff would have on his neighbors and competitors in the cutlery business in Little Valley at the time. One could wonder if Mr. Korn was a popular man with some of the local cutlery businessmen. This is an exact copy of transcripts relating to this situation. So what it's getting at, what it's saying there is that as the American Cutlery Association was trying to undervalue or charge importers with undervaluation of their cutlery so they could charge cheaper prices, so were the importers doing very similar things, like trying to wage war against the American Cutlery Association in the way of, stories and in local papers and things like that of the time. It was very much a political fight, and a lot of people were winning or losing money, and it ended up that the American Cutlery Association pretty much won over at the time. Now, what they did to implement this was, and William Rockwell himself was the person who appointed sort of this person to investigate and oversee imports at the import offices, both here in the United States and over in, I believe, Germany. And it was a gentleman by the name of Osborne. And they go into this guy's character, which I'm sure this is boring for some of you, but it goes along with the history of this specific knife and how I am attempting to, or guessing on its date of manufacture. About 3 years ago, in fact, since the president's administration came into power, the American Cutlery Association set to work to put obstructions in the way of importations. There was a man in New York named Osborne who was a very disreputable man. He had run his course. He had been in 2 or 3 concerns in New York and had played the bad and could not get a position anywhere at any price. They took him up, and in their meetings it was proposed to employ him and send him abroad as a spy on importers in New York. There was an objection to his character by some of the members of that association, and Mr. Rockwell, the president, made the point that it takes a thief to catch a thief, and they voted to employ the man. Okay, so this gentleman, what he would do is he would be tasked with overlooking imported knives and making reports about them. And what he would do is he would bog them down with paperwork, kind of in a custom situation. He would ask questions that then required answers, right, of the knife makers. And he would ask so many questions that it would make it impossible to actually import the knives. And so people like the Alfred Field and Company were unable to even get their knives through customs in order to sell. And this is how this American Cutlery Association sort of worked. And the same guy, Osborne, was also tasked with going abroad to other countries and investigating these knives before they even got on the boat. Well, while he was there, he's basically a drunkard. All he did was party. He totally overdrafted his expense accounts, and essentially he was just a bad dude. He was a very nefarious character of ill reputation, as you can take from the reading that I did. And so it was a total fiasco. It was very corrupt system, and it really just reminds me, if you're a fan of that movie, Gangs of New York, that movie kind of paints a picture of the politics of that time. And I think that's just kind of how everything was. It was very much the Wild, Wild West. And all of these knife makers were, just unscrupulous in their business practices and ethics. And I'm going to go further into that a little bit, because that is the Great Eastern Cutlery book, like I mentioned. And they talk a lot about Northfield Knives in there, who were also very much part of this Tariff Act. In fact, Caitlin, the owner of Northfield Knives, it was actually his relationship with certain senators that got the Tariff Acts proposed to Congress in the first place. Okay, so a lot of talking, a lot of long-winded, so this knife, as you can see, do you see this shield that's on it? That shield says "Hold Fast." If you look at this incredibly rare blade etch, if I can get it to read in the light, let me find it. Anyways, it says very clearly, "Hold Fast Tobacco." So, and then on the shield, which is, aside from being, having an etch that says "Hold Fast," it's actually printed on the shield, which is very kind of, I have not seen it. I've never seen it. You see it on some advertising knives, like some Remington knives and stuff like that are famous for having advertising on them. I have never seen a Miller Brothers knife with an advertisement on it. And I've kind of collected them because I've told this story before. My wife's maiden name is Miller, and her father and her uncle are in business together. And so Miller Brothers is just something that is close to me. Not the knife maker, obviously, but we start collecting things for any different number of reasons, right? And Miller Brothers knives, because it was my wife's maiden name, that kind of drew me into investigating a little bit more about Miller Brothers knives. So that the etch on there says "Hold Fast Tobacco." And what I have here is an actual tobacco card, is what it's called. And it is for the Hold Fast Chew Company. And you can see there's a little cartoon here. There's a lady selling tobacco, and there's somebody trying to steal the tobacco, and he's being caught by a cop, as well as this little dog right here. Now, this is a Victorian era tobacco card. On the back, it's got it's got the beginning of the scenario. It's kind of like a cartoon, see? Like he's stealing this tobacco, the dog's on him, the cop's coming, and then because she was sleeping. Maybe it goes like this. Oh, yes. Okay. It goes like that. Isn't that cool? All right. So she's kind of dozing off here, and he decides he's going to sneak up, and this dog's waiting to get him. And then the next one comes, right? And that dog's got him now, and the cop's coming, and then you unfold it, and there it is right there, and the cop's got him. So this, if you look closely, like this is an English scene. Like this is a Victorian era scene, maybe in like London. And there's this other girl on the back here, and you see this dog here, okay? Hold Fast. And it has Wessingers and bait on it. And that same dog is ripping this doll away from her. So I did a little bit of investigating. Globe Tobacco was a company out of Detroit, Michigan, and they had and they made Hold Fast. Hold Fast was a brand that was that they made to export to England or to the UK or Europe, right? England, because it's in English here. But a Hold Fast was, I found a nickname for this dog, which is basically like an English Terrier and or a Jack Russell, like that sort of dog. Which, if you have any experience with Jack Russells and those type of dogs, they're very brave and can be a little bit aggressive beyond their size. Anyway, that's a nickname. From what I could tell, it's a nickname for a dog. Hold Fast, and that's where that comes from, and the brand is called Hold Fast and marketed towards the English, but it's a Globe Tobacco company's brand, made in Detroit, Michigan. So the reason I brought up and discussed the tariffs is because it's odd that an American manufacturer, Miller Brothers, and this information could be in some error, okay? I'm not an authority. This is just what I have found on the internet, and then some of this is like my kind of guesstimation at what may have happened. But I looked up, and there was a tobacco box that was dated 1883 that had this exact tobacco card illustration on the box, and it was stamped by Customs 1883 on the box. And so I would date this card to being around 1883. Now the knife is we know, because Miller Brothers went out of business in 1926, so we can safely say that it's before that era. But this card and Hold Fast doing advertising, overseas in Europe, when Europe has plenty of knife manufacturers in Sheffield and Solingen, Germany. So it just kind of seemed odd. But once you start to take into account the Tariff Act of 1888 and what was going on in that time period with the importing and exporting of foreign cutlery, you start to kind of see, like, this gentleman, William Rockwell, was the president of the American Cutlery Association, okay? And so tariffs are about trade and whatnot. And I'm just sort of maybe imagining that in some way, the United States was trying to gain markets in the UK, as well as, Europe trying to import here and use our market. So around the time of 1888, and then it mentioned there up until 1900 there was, this American Cutlery Association was in power, and with Miller Brothers, William Rockwell at the helm being president, I imagine that a knife like this was, marketed in some extent with this Hold Fast Tobacco Company to be exported to the UK as some sort of maybe giveaway or something, or a promotional item of the time. And so I date this knife. That's kind of how I get the date. is that I would imagine it's after the Tariff Act of 1888. This is from 1883. So this is going to be slightly earlier. However, right around, between 1888 and 1900 is when all of the shenanigans with the tariffs is going on. And I believe this knife to be somewhere between 1888 and 1910, just to give it a conservative estimate. And then one of the most amazing things about this knife that you don't even see really at first glance, it's got that amazing hold fast etch on it, which I apologize for not being able to really catch it properly, because it's a really, really neat etch that's on there. But if you look at this bone, the bone is just crisp like it was new. But do you see the pattern? I don't know. I can't confirm it. But if I was a guessing man, those would be M's for Miller Brothers inscribed in the jigging pattern of the knife. And you can just see the M in there, which I just think is so incredibly cool. If I was going to make an advertising knife with all kinds of etchings on it and the brand name of another company that's, and this knife's maybe being shipped over to Europe, wouldn't you take the opportunity to inscribe your initials into the knife? I just think it's killer. Guys, if anyone has information that contradicts or confirms any of what I've talked about here today, I would just love to hear it. I would really love to hear it, because this knife is one that I just think is about as cool as it gets, historically, and for the etches and the advertising quality. People collect just tobacco related products. People love to collect advertising pieces, and then people also love to collect pocket knives. So this particular piece kind of has 2 or 3 different worlds of collecting, all kind of combining into one knife. And forgive the 30-minute video, but I think that this piece is extremely special and deserves a little bit of discussion. And I think it's incredible, some of the history that is in these books and can be, shared about, talked about a little bit. All right, guys, thanks for listening. If you made it all the way through, you get a medal of thanks from me. Have a great day.